Hello, hi Bharat. Hmm.
Hi, Sean. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
I see attendees coming in. Mahesh, Jeffrey, Marcus. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We'll just give it a couple of minutes, so that people can join. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes, I would say.
Sure.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. I see people joining. We're close to 17 people. Hey, Sean. Would you like to say anything, before we start? Any pre-context or something?
No, I think the audience would be
Mhm.
wondering, right? Because they should be seeing a lot of webinars where people keep talking a lot about agents and AI and MCP. So it'll be a
Yeah,
definite different session for them to basically go down to the foundation of how all this layers which you talk on 7 actually works and built based on the APIs, right?
correct.
So I'm sure we should give something useful a takeaway so that how foundation is so important for you before you start thinking about how do
Hmm.
you do wonders on agents, right? So
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
quick sneak peek of what they can expect from the session today.
Yeah, cool. I think let's get started. I think we've got like 25 people join. So people are running late, we have recording anyway. So let's kick off. Okay. Yeah.
Sure.
So thank you everyone. My name is Bharat Kumar. I'm the founder and CEO of Digital API Craft, or DAC, or has like many customers and prospects, and we like to call ourselves a DAC or DSC. So I used to my background a little bit about my background. I used to work with a company called Apigee, and then got acquired by Google. Uh, uh, and then we did a bit of consulting, and then that spinned out into a more of a platform and product approach. In the middle of the COVID. So since then, we've been working in this space. Yeah. So I would like to bring in Sean here. Sean, I've been friends for 4 years. We caught up, working, in the similar topic. That's how we started talking to each other, and we ended up working together. So yeah, I'll give it to you, Sean. Why don't you give a quick intro?
Hey, thanks, Bharat. My name is Shan, and I'm the Chief Product Officer for DAC. And a quick 2 seconds about my background. So I've spent a lot of time working for an investment bank out of Singapore called Standard Chartered. Then I've spent a couple of years working for Zurich, and then I've decided maybe it's time for me to go start build something. And as Bharat said, we always had this thing in common. We talk every time we meet, we talk more about APIs than talking for some personal things. So I think time has come rightly. So then I came on board, and then I think, yeah, so we are basically building the next generation of how an API ecosystem should look like. Thanks, Bharat. Over
Cool.
to you.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Sean. So let's jump into so I think the way webinar is structured to everyone is we got few slides. We'll talk about like 20 minutes or so about our experience. What have we seen. Hearing different problem challenges around this multi gateway API ecosystem. What are the challenges around it? And then we go jump into a little bit about our product. What have we done in this space where our customers has been using and seeing great value in that. So why does this topic matter, right? So and also, by the way, there is a poll. Please do participate. It will also help us to look question and answer and come back to you. It'll be fun to also listen to what you're going through in this space. Yeah. So the multi gateway. So this the whole conversation or a discussion, I think, started coming up. Just in the middle of the COVID, and people were already experiencing about having multiple API platforms, and then also there's different ways of deploying APIs. So deploying an API gotten so much faster and easier with the cloud API gateways coming into the picture, and enterprises have much more lot of choices, in deploying and running their API platforms, right? So, and also the cost of running, the time to market, time to develop and deploy an API, adding all the API security. So there are different choices available for different technology leaders, and every tech leaders, have their own choices. And we also seen API gateways, started, with the legacy solving integration problems and having a API layer on top of it with the likes of MuleSoft, Apigee, and IBM API Connect, things like that. Almost every top enterprise software companies today, if you look at it, right, so they have their some own version of API management software. And then the space is still evolving. There are more API gateways coming into the market, more open source. We keep hearing, the Docker, cloud native gateways, Envoy based gateways, etc., things like that. So with that, I think there's a number of choices to make, given how your organization is, set up and run. And also it occurs due to mergers, acquisitions. We've seen companies where the organizations have acquired few companies that ended up having at least 4 or 5 API platforms, as far as we know, right? So and then also we've seen businesses having different presence or different countries, having their own business units and having their own tech stack control over there, right? So this has led to multiple API platforms. It's good, it's great, to be on multiple platforms, but at the same time, there are a number of challenges, that has, that we are seeing, with this, right? So how do we solve this, right? So, uh, sorry, I think I jumped a slide. Yeah, let me go back. So yeah, so what happens, when we acquire or introduce more API gateways, so the question that that leads to is, how does the discovery happens? The I think the I like to ask this question. Every customer or prospect I meet, do you have a way of looking at all the APIs, in the organizations? Do you have a visibility of all the API gateway instances, or at least cataloged APIs in one place, right? So, and then the governance kicks in, who developed this API, who owns this API, and then, that leads to a lot of duplication. So, I was in a conference like 3 years ago with API Days London, and there was a great session by John Phoenix, HSBC. I think he brought in a notion analogy of if you walk into a room and you find a pile of books like everywhere scattered around, instead of the finding that one specific book, instead of finding like searching and everywhere, you will just end up ordering from a from a bookstore or an online, right, so on an online e-commerce company. So just like the same way, so developers end up developing new APIs if they can't find one. So that has led to a lot of duplication. And then with that, obviously, there's a total cost of ownership. How do we quantify that? How much of investment has been gone? So there's no way of looking at this information, when we have multiple APIs, running on different platforms. So let's hear, what are the foundational, how do we fix this? What are the temporary fixes that we have seen? I think one of the key thing is the gateway portals, right? So every API gateway has their own API portal, and they have they come with their own customization cost, and then it comes with their own way of developing. So this is where I want to bring in Sean and hear his experience. What has he seen in the past? Like what are the problems that started arising from this multi gateway, and then what are the fixes that we can see? Sean, over to you.
Thanks, Bharat. So yeah, so multi-gateway is actually not anymore not a common topic, right? Because people actually started their API journey with one form of a gateway, but then I think for many reasons they would have start going across different gateways, right? So most of the organization take a very informed choice. Either they want to consolidate to one API ecosystem, or they will try to bring some form of a governance model or one common umbrella to manage multiple different players as well, right? I've seen both the flavors, like where in my previous companies, so where we were running like 3 or 4 different gateways, supporting around 50 markets. And then ideal option for us to like, why don't we consolidate into one common ecosystem so that any assets we build can actually be considered in the same fashion, right? Second option is taking the cost into consideration, migration effort into consideration, also thinking about, is it really something which we want to do when we can really invest and do a different kind of a transformation? Then we started living with it, right? So that's where it becomes very tricky and complex, where you don't know what is available there. And even if it's available, it's not easy for you to find out. And even if you find out, it's not easy for you to start using it, right? So that's are the three core problems where we see. And I know API is one of the favorite child of security any given day. So the moment if you're not able to manage this ecosystem in a very healthy and hygiene manner, then the first thing you will get shot is basically by the security, right? So that's what it is very, very important for us to see how do we get the house in order? How do we have absolute visibility of what we run as an API ecosystem in the organization? And then how do we slowly start getting into getting the governance and control? Because most of the time, just because we consolidated it, we shouldn't assume that it has a well-defined governance and compliance in place, right? That's another problem where we see comments saying, yes, we know every API which is running out there. We have absolute control of every gateway running out there. But then when the famous audit comes in, then we try to figure out is do everything is actually in shape and place for us, right? So that's the other things. And yeah, so a lot of people also, as I said, they always find a workaround rather finding a permanent solution to fix it. But now that in the era of agents and people understand how important and how important is your API ecosystem, especially the way you're currently operating, the way you're currently putting it out there, if you really want to make even the first step on AI, right? So that's there is nothing called a workaround or a temporary fix in my view. If you want to fix it, if you want to handle multi-gateway in a simple or in a complex fashion, you need to take care of these three things where you need to bring your house in order to ensure
Mm.
you have absolute visibility, ensure you have governance in place, and ensure you're completely secured. Yeah, that's my view about it.
Yeah, yeah, great. Thanks for sharing those points. Now, those are very, very relevant. Let's talk a little bit about the build versus buy approach here, right? So, we know API gateway comes with certain additional modules. There are API analytics. There is an abstraction view of they call it as API portal or a developer portal, right? In the past, I think, I've been in an industry for the last 10 years. When I was at Apogee, have seen, customers taking, a very basic developer portal, and, invest like 3 months in developing and enhancing that. And then, it was a catalog. They could onboard developers, they could have visibility, right? But I think as the third party API ecosystem grows, and then the term called API marketplaces start emerging in, how does organization can start building an API marketplace from it's a transition from developer portal to API marketplace. And that's when enterprises saw that a lot of nuances going in loop of building it in house or working with an SI, and then still not there, right? So because there's a growing demand of how this third party ecosystem are growing, they want seamless access to APIs, and then also a developer experience comes into play. All of that has to be top notch, top of the game. Only then I think we've seen the success of the API ecosystem and the API adoption level. So could you share some thoughts over there? Yeah.
Okay, so I've
Yeah.
I've done both, right? I've
Yeah.
actually built one, I've also bought one, right? So I can tell with a lot of authority what it takes for someone to build. And maybe at some point I've also thought maybe I shouldn't have done that, right? See what happens usually in an organization when you start, again, ambitions are pretty big, right? So and when you start building, you basically start with a small scope and then you start building it. And I
Yeah.
think 12 months into the road, you understand, what you started building something and then already 10 new things have come in the market, right? And the amount of cost you spent and do you really like achieve what you wanted? Answer is no, right?
Mm.
Because the catching up game is very difficult, especially in our space, right? So
Correct.
and of course, one thing is people think it's always cost, and the second thing they think is much better control when you build. I think those are not any more relevant because now you
Yeah.
understand you can bring something pretty quick and you can start as you said, like now the hyperscalers are making life much easier for all of us, right? So if you want to basically
Correct.
get a complete ecosystem up and running, right, especially a SaaS platform, or if you want any of the products to be up and running,
Yeah.
you can put anywhere between 2 to 3 months, right? and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that is my view on buy. But on build, right, when you think about buy, so that's what I did in my previous experience, right? So
Yeah.
when I came on board to Zurich, that's the first thing I wanted to do, right? As soon as I came on board, I called Dak, and you know what? I know that I've already gone through that tough journey of building one. This time I'm not building, I'm going to buy one. When I say I'm buying, so it's basically because the platform is also flexible for where you want to enhance and extend the platform. That's more important. It's more like you take a framework and start building on it, right? So
Mm.
that is what I see the industries are moving towards. So like now, instead of you really want to think about putting a plan, start building one, might as well go buy something, get a flexible framework, which is very, very important. And then either you can completely customize the way you want to build journeys and flows. And of course, look and feel is the last thing, but then also you ensure that you have absolute control, because platforms like these do
Yeah,
give you that flexibility to start building things on top as well, right?
correct.
So
Yeah,
I would say, since I've
yeah.
done, and I will always vote for a buy rather going for a build.
Correct. Yeah. Look, I think when the environments start getting complex, right? So that's when you every leaders will start evaluating, right? One is not just about the cost, or also draining the internal organization's time now in solving this problem, right? So, in our opinion, I think we keep talking about it. So the APM management space has evolved into a multiple broader categories, right? So API management was a very broader space, and then now we are seeing API marketplaces, another product space that every organization is looking at investing as a product approach rather than building in house, right? So we've seen customers, even our own customers spend as good as 12 to up to 3 years. Some of the banks that we work with, and then using multiple choices available out there, some open source combinations, some gateway provided portal, and then when they realize that this is like I said, it's going to drain an organization's time, in developing, and solving this foundational things. Let's talk about little bit about this foundational practice. Before somebody can even think of building a great API marketplace for themselves, external API marketplace, what do they need to solve, right? So I think discovery documentation. Let's talk a little bit about that, Sean. What's your experience on building this foundational elements in place? Yeah,
Yeah, so I think this is pretty much what we started talking about, right? See,
yeah,
when we most of the time when I talk to someone, I ask them like, do you really know how many APIs do you have in the organization, right? That's a question with a lot of depth, and people think it's easy to answer, but I'm sure, Bharat, you would have also heard this or asked this question to many
yeah.
people, right? So
Many
when
times, yeah,
yeah, and so when I ask them, yeah, they give me a number, right? It's and the best part is, if I'm part of the organization, I can validate that number, right? And then when you start really working with that organization, then you understand the number you told is basically like 5 times less of what you think you had, right? So discovery becomes so important, because it's not just about you knowing what is running in your ecosystem. Also, do you know, is that really required for you to run in the first place, right? So discovery helps you in many other ways to ensure, because the problem is when you run multiple gateways, multiple instances of gateways, right, running hybrid on-prem cloud, right? How do you get one pane of glass to see everything which is happening there and see that you can make the
mm,
discovery easy, right? So that's why
correct,
every organization, when they start going on to the API journey, they start focusing very limited on very minimal on discovery, like thinking that it can be uploaded
mm,
or it can be pulled up from a GitHub or any of the repos and stuff like that, right? But now
yeah,
the world is moved in a different way. As you said, how quick
yeah,
you can plan an instance and bring things on board, right? That's the
correct,
evolution of discovery happened in the last 5 years, right? And why is
correct,
documentation so important? The moment I talk about documentation in the API world, they think it's an handcrafted swagger, right? And
correct,
that's also now no one actually does. Anyone, there are so many softwares out there and AI now, like where you can have a very, very well-defined structured documentation getting generated, right? So
correct,
it is so important, because those days when someone wants to understand an API, they always go read a Swagger to understand, or the immediate quick thing they want to do is basically like, is there a
yeah,
posting collection, or is there a hypertest kind of stuff which I can quickly test to understand the mock response, right? That's two other ways. Now the
correct,
documentation is so intuitive for people to like to see even the use case, whether I even want this API in the first place or not, before doing anything further, right? And the
correct,
first two is good. Every organization in the name of a developer portal or in terms of a marketplace I've always built, but then is anyone using it, right? So because when I start building, I always believe in looking at the user analytics, especially on seeing how many people are really coming in, what are they looking at, right? And some, because when you launch a new marketplace or when you launch an internal platform, right, they always like to come on board to just play around for the first few weeks, and then you will understand the real audience will start using it, right? So unless until whatever you're building and you're putting it out there, you're going to make it
yeah,
as a self-service option, your adoption have to be really forced or mandated, right? So you have to take care of these three, very, very important for you to be success in what you're running, especially on the API ecosystem kind of a platform, and
yeah,
ensure that people are using it. It is relevant as well, And of course, since
Yeah,
all these are taken care, I will not say governance is absolutely important for you to keep that in good shape throughout the way you're going to continue operating it. And the last
yeah,
one, this is something I should ask you, analytics, right? More than me, maybe. I know all the C-level people like to look into the analytics, right? Is
correct.
that is that the reason that what is the information you guys are getting by looking into it, Bharat?
Correct. Yeah. Look, I think one of the things you pointed out that the analytics will the adoption metrics, adoption analytics, right? How does so the runtime API analytics is one aspect, and also measuring how the API is getting adopted, and measuring starting with the internal, right, and also extending that the API adoption level, and also putting a the metrics to it, is a developer. I mean, just for example, right? So if you launch an external marketplace, measuring how much time a developer has spent looking at a documentation. I mean, is the documentation seamless, right? So the famous the measure time to first hello world. Will a developer can make the first API call in the first 10-15 minutes of of his time spending in API marketplace. And then also if he has started making first API call using that sandbox on in a marketplace, and then where does it start? How much API calls has it done? Okay, now what can we do as a API provider to make it much more better? So these things, I think, when organizations start measuring up, so when they really truly care about their API ecosystem and want to expand their third-party journey, that's where I think the API marketplace's nuances kicks in. Okay, so we need this, we need that, and then the elements start growing in, and then when you start building it in-house, these things kind of spin out, and then the budget issues, you can't keep going and asking budget issues. So if there is a platform approach, if the platform can provide all of this, and then they go live in the next 2-3 months, and I think that's an absolutely a great value, and also time to market, and also organizations more than two of these, and I think they will start looking at all the missed opportunities that they have seen, right, all the third parties coming in and walking away. We've heard organizations coming and talking to us. One of the large fintech walked out because they didn't have a proper external API infrastructure and API documentation in place, right? So it's no more a standard. It's no more a nice to have API marketplace or API portal. It's a must have. And with the AI agents and coming in with this, the marketplace has new audiences, right? So we are hearing agents will going to be your new third party, users. And then I think, yeah, so every organization must brace up, for an API marketplace initiative. It was a little bit slow for some organizations. It was looked upon as a only the top companies, top insurance banks, or telcos can do it. But I think everyone has to open up their APIs in a way that that it creates that true API ecosystem. So this is exactly what we do. I think we have. I think we are on time. Without wasting much time, we would like to showcase some of the aspects, some of the topics, how we have solved here. I think Sean is going to do a little bit of a product demo, and then we'll leave 5 minutes for the questions. Yeah. So over to you, Sean. I think let me stop share. Uh,
Yeah. Thanks, Bharat. I think before I get into the demo, I think Marcus has actually asked a very interesting question. Right. So, Marcus, I would like to answer this question in two parts. Yes, see, when you talk about how to achieve an API ecosystem, there are like some basic foundation elements which is required for you to achieve, right? How disciplined are you planning to have your runtime? How disciplined are you planning to have your like a design time? And how does both these things come together in one umbrella, right? That's basically what you call as an ecosystem, right? And of course we can show it, and because that's the business we are in, right? We help organizations to actually define and run a proper API ecosystem, even though we are not into the runtime assets where our focus is going towards. But then we can actually tell you well defined how you can actually want to define an API ecosystem depending on the size of the organization you are from, right? And how does a perfect API bucket box look? Okay, see, I have to be biased, right? You should actually see one of DAX built marketplaces out there, right? You can check any of our client portals. You will understand how different, how deep, and how technical the portal can actually look like, right? Because it also serves for business and also non-technical people. but also we know that developers are basically also a very important character for us. So we also keep that technical quotient so that they also come and enjoy using our marketplace as well, right? So what I would say, like, let me go into the demo, right? And you will understand how we look the platforms have been split across as modules, right? So I'm going to share my screen and then we can talk a bit more, right? Okay. So if now I'm sure you can see my screen. So I'm so what does that do, right? So we actually have we are a SaaS platform, so we basically do two important capabilities. One for completely managing and building internal API foundation ecosystem, right? For so you want to completely sort your house in order, bring everything into one umbrella. How do you want to do that internally? And then we also do an external facing marketplace purely for your monetization, your product catalogs. Now you want to basically run your partnerships, right? So these are the two things. So today I'll be focusing more on our new product called Service Hub. So Service Hub is now getting rolled out as we speak in the market to our clients, where if you have multiple gateways, then there are five things Bharat was actually interested to show you guys about discovery, documentation, and then he's also talked about self-service adoption. And let me also cover a bit of governance, right? And then, of course, since analytics is also important, I thought I'll also run through that as well. Yeah. So we've been talking about how do we solving multiple gateway problems, right? So imagine I was talking discovery is so important, and how easy is it for someone to actually discover APIs available in a portal, right? So we have actually got something for you to have a look at it, right? So we support most of the usual suspected gateways out there in the market, right? Right from Kong, Azure, AWS. So you can think about MuleSoft, IBM Apigee Connect. Apart from what I show you, we also support other gateways. So we have actually created an integration in such a way you configure an instance of your gateway and you basically scan and you get every single endpoint running onto your gateway coming here, right? So that is important where you understand how simple and easy scanning is, right? And the second one also, if you see, in this way, if your organization is running like three different gateways or four different gateways, it's absolutely fine because you can actually bring every single gateway onto the portal completely configured, and then you can just sync at times. And every time you want to like bring your API catalog ready, it's as simple as you scanning, bringing an API from your instance and then cataloging it, right? Let me go to one of these gateways to show. For example, I've done a sync from one of my Azure instances configured, and the moment he brings it up, it basically catalogs it for you, right? When you say catalogs it, so we are also showing different labels here because of course whatever I'm showing is completely customizable, and everything can be completely an admin API driven behind the scene, not necessarily you have to come onto the UI to do anything I'm doing now. Yeah. So one thing, usually when I talked about external and internal capabilities, when you bring after a discovery, you get to have an option to choose whether you want to catalog this API on the external marketplace or do you want to do it on the internal only, right? Or there's also an option where you don't want to publish this API at all anywhere, but just keep it as part of the discovery as well, right? So that's also an option to do it. And then, of course, people still love bringing their handcrafted swaggers as a documentation or any of the metadata information. Feel free. We also have an option for that. But the other important capability we're bringing on the table is documentation, right? So we were talking about documentation. So now, do really developers want to spend time sitting and doing a documentation? Is there a way you can generate it, right? So now we were also like come up with an AI capability where the moment you do a discovery, you bring an API out there, and then how can you do a quick, well-structured documentation using the AI capability? I'm not going to generate one. I'm just want to tell you this because I have things more to cover. So yeah, also if you want to understand each of these capabilities more in depth, I've also like we will be start publishing series of videos to understand the capabilities where we go more in depth to explain how each of these components and each of these capabilities work. Yeah. So this is the second feature because now even if you have 100 APIs, you can bring it on board and one click you can basically generate documentation for all 100 APIs which is running out there in a very similar structured fashion. Because I've seen most of the organization, the documentation will be all forms and shape, right? It's very difficult for them to have one common structure of how they want to do the documentation, right? So that's the second problem. And third one, I was talking about why metadata is so important, right? If I'm sure most of the people who joined may also been done an API development in the past, right? This is a hygiene, right? It's very, very important for you to have your metadata well defined, right? So what we have done is if you have a well defined metadata, we'll make your life even more easier by creating an amazing search capability for you using the metadata, right? So that's another vector search. It's another AI capability we have built as part of the platform. So if you have, say, like 500 APIs, and if you want to specifically do a search, gone those days where people do search with description and naming convention. So if you want to specifically look and do a search, looking into a metadata, it's possible, right? So imagine in this API, I'm specifically looking for a payments API, which I can get deployed only in the UK market, where I have, say, like 70 different APIs named as payments. So in this way, I can do a free Google kind of search to actually bring it, and then you can do whatever you want. Either you want to subscribe it and start using it, right? We have also created, why every time when we have to create a capability to download Postman collection, right? That's one question Bharat keep asking us all the time, right? So we created a utility called as hypertest. So now we bring all the experience on the same screen, where now you got your API, your documented API, you can also test your API, right? This is another capability we built in called as hypertest, where you can bring your API. Either you can do a similar simple mock kind of Swagger response testing, or if you want a fully transactional one, even that's possible, right? You can actually call, we do proxy routing, or you can actually talk to an endpoint deployed in a gateway. You can use any of these formats to start testing with hypertest, right? And the last one, again, as I said, developers are very important for us. So we also ensure that every time we bring a specification, we also bring more intuitive for them to understand how we do it, right? So, and I know everyone loves seeing pet store, because for all commercial obvious reasons, I can only show things which I can show in public. Otherwise, I would have loved to show a couple of serious APIs we do for our clients, right? And the last word is governance, because this is also something we showed in the slide, right? Why governance is so important. So what is our 2 cents which you're contributing to ensure governance is in place, right? So you know that this famous word, every time we talk about open API specification, after 3.x series, you know that there is also linting support coming in, right? So now we also run a lint check, right? So what does that mean? So every time when you bring an API, then we basically run a complete scan to ensure whether the linting is properly done. If there is an issue, then we'll highlight the issue for you to go check and also fix it before you're able to publish this API, right? And the second one, of course, our contribution to the security and CISO folks, right? If you are in an external facing organization, and if there is a need for you to run a pen test, and usually after we go for a pen test, it costs us some X dollars of money, and then you'll identify 15 criticals, 5 high, 3 medium, and 4 low, right? But we thought, why don't we run a quick top 10 WASP check and also do a security screening and show you all the possible threats which you can actually identify from the spec, so that at least you can save the first round of pen testing cost by this scanning, which will tell you have 5 criticals, this is where the issue is, and then you can fix it. So this is more like a pre-scan for you before you start doing a pen test, right? So that's another capability we built. And we are also trying to bring more of a live scenario here, because now we still do a runtime NIST tech, but we were thinking, is there a way we can talk to any NIST real-time database for also to run the scan, right? With that, I will move into the next, which is the important topic, analytics. I see another question from Mahesh. Let me finish this and I'll definitely take that question, Mahesh. So, so why analytics is so important now? I know that we always like to have a good looking Grafana dashboards, or I know most of the people who run Elk and something like that, they always have very good looking, well defined Grafana or Kibana kind of stuff. So how they want to use it. So we were thinking, how do we bring this flavor also as part of the platform itself? So in that way, so we have actually have 5 different categories of analytics. So where we split it as API ops, which is very important for someone to understand a gateway analytics of what is happening to this endpoint, how many people have been using it, what are the type of requests coming in, right? You can actually slice and dice the way you can think of an endpoint running in a gateway. And of course, everyone, when you talk about API, we also talk about response time and SLA. So even that's something you can test here, and you can capture every information here. And then we have the second, which is user analytics. As I said, okay, before I go there, I want to show you some cool thing. So we also have a heat map, right? So what does that mean? If you have an organization running in, like, say, like 20 different markets, right? And we can also spot where are the different consumers sitting for specifically consuming an endpoint from a gateway, right? So if an API is deployed in Singapore, and then if there is someone consuming from UK or from the US or from Sydney, that's something also we can be tracked as part of the analytics here, right? So the next analytics is users. As I said, what is more important is not about building a beautiful marketplace, is anyone putting it out to use, and is one someone really using it, right? So this will completely tell you the full picture, how many people are using it, how often they're using it, to what level they're using it. And we can also like start having a ranking saying what is the most commonly used or most commonly touched asset in the marketplace and things like that, right? So we have also focused a bit more on how we want to get this statistic. This is more for the C-level people or more for the management to understand, okay, I've invested $1. Is there a real ROI coming out of it? And that is a real proof point for you to see whether you have to still continue running this, or maybe there's something fundamentally not right and maybe you should shut it down, right? So that's the kind of stats you get here. And the third one is web traffic. So this again for us, since it's API, most of them is external. So we also want to like get all the different contents which we can do, right? Of course, where are the different traffics coming from, where it's been consumed from. So this is more, for example, if you want, this is a very similar thing what you get in Akamai or in Imperva if you want to like get the tracks on what's happening on an HTTP traffic or an API traffic on the CDN, right? So it's a very similar kind of logs what you see here. And then this is purely focused on C-level people, right? So this is like, which will give you a complete view. If I'm investing on a particular API business and if API has been put there, how does it look? Are people really using it? And also if you want to transform this into the PNL number, then if there is an API getting monetized, how you can actually get this information. All this is available here. And the last one is security analytics. I didn't run my linting stuff to show you this. So the moment I run my linting, the moment I run my top 10 OWASP check, and it will actually show all the APIs when they go through a scan. This dashboard will actually show you APIs which has vulnerabilities, where it help you to actually pick it up and fix it the way you want to do it. Yeah. So these are the 5 focus areas how we split analytics today. And I think with that, I wanted to actually uh, tell something very interesting. I didn't tell this to Bharat also, but yeah. So what's coming soon? Yeah. So I know the world is talking so much about MCP. So we are also coming up with how do you make your APIs MCP ready, right? Because we have invested a lot of money and we built a lot of APIs, but no point in now we thinking about something else. So the next new feature which Dark will be launching, I was like, basically we're coming up with something. How do you make your market around your make your APIs MCP ready? And other one is we are also thinking something called as it's called as an API manager. So what does that do? Is it's a cool thing which we are building. So for example, if you want to pick an API from a gateway and then you want to deploy that into another gateway, which means I can pick an API from MuleSoft and I can actually deploy that API in Kong, right? So what is the intention of us doing this? It's as easy as how I'm talking to you guys now, because in this way, if most of the organization, when they're trying to move from one gateway to another gateway, migration is always very painful and it's not pretty simple and straightforward, right? Where in a gateway, you call a policy and there is a gateway where you call it as a plugin, right? So how can you bridge this? So that is another capability which we are working on. So I will show you both in my next webinar, right? That will be more hands-on, where I will show you how you can actually make your APIs MCP ready. And I'll also show you how does the manager comes into play when you want to migrate. Yeah. With that, I think we are done with the demo from our side. I will pass it back to Bharat. Over to you, Bharat. I think you're on mute, Bharat.
Yeah, sorry. Um, I hope, yeah, you can see my screen, right? So, yeah. So I tried to answer a couple of questions there. Sean, I think, I think, just on a closing topic, just on this API landscape, right? So API, yeah, the whole API management and API ecosystem is evolving. Earlier, I think, organizations, would have been, better off, with just API gateway and buying one of these API platforms. Now, I think, they need to look at the API management as a separate control plane, a unified API management, plane, and then API marketplace as a product approach. I think building and wasting and draining a lot of the internal resources. I think it's always better to look at the product approach. It's validated by Gartner, and I think everyone's approach is to go use the product from something like us. And then it's always a API publisher view, API consumer view, and it was always a case where API gateway is there and then the developer portal is there. But the API management in its true definition, from our perspective is API management kicks in when the APIs are on, when the APIs are developed, and that's when the API management governance, cataloging, centralized cataloging, and then making the APIs readiness as API products on the marketplace. So these are all the aspects. So this is what we try to convey. Would love to get more questions, and I think we have some questions. We'll try to answer them. Just from a future perspective, I think we are looking at, like I said, the agents, the autonomous discovery of these APIs. the MCP compliant, APIs, or MCP compliant marketplace, whatever we want to call it. So the MCPs, are getting, more attention, more adoption, and across gateways, across APIs. So this will going to make a fundamental shift in how API marketplaces are seen. And then I think in our next webinar, we're going to talk about specifically about MCPs and how marketplaces should be ready, in this whole ever changing, the fast changing, digital world. Yeah. So we have Abhijit joining in the next webinar. Do sign up, please. So it'll going to be much more interesting conversation. And from to hear from Abhijit, one of our top, public sector bank in India, we're going to bring on board, and then discuss, about how things are changing in API marketplaces. So I tried to answer a couple of questions. Sean, would you like to take some questions from Marcus and some of the questions from our audiences?
Yeah, sure, Bharat. So I see, I think Mahesh has asked a question. I promised him I'll get back to him. Yeah, so I think, see, Mahesh, so there is not something very specifically where you define a governance for an API type, right? So as a platform, the governance is already like coming as out of the box for you, right? So what we basically do is when we're trying to actually discover everything and then start maintaining your API from the portal, right? That's where you start building. Of course, if there is any specific to a standard, and if you want to actually bring it as an extended extension, or if you want to enhance it, we can always do that, right? Because to my knowledge, I don't see there is any a specific focus on risk and governance perspective, because that's an umbrella we cover for every single API coming onto the marketplace, right? The next question is, okay, that's a very good question. Yes, we do. Of course, without a credential, you cannot run a security test. We do actually mask the credentials. It's pretty much like how you basically tokenize anything, right? So the moment you subscribe, we actually get the key for you to run it, and you cannot actually copy paste the key. So the key basically gets into the hypertext itself when you run any of the scans which I told you, right? In that way, abuse can only be done by the person who subscribed the API and not able to even take the key outside, right? So there is a credential has to be given for you to run a test, and the credential cannot be copied or it can be taken out. Yeah. And the next one, yes, that's definitely possible. As I said, we have absolute visibility of every single endpoint running in. We also have a traffic analytics, which I showed you, which will tell you whether this API is ever touched, ever visited, or is ever been consumed at all. Because that will also give you a very good report for you to basically deprecate that endpoint if it's not been used or put in use anymore, right? That's also very important as part of the discovery, and the platform is actually capable of doing that as well, right? All right. Then there's a next question. Can you open the chat for emails?
Yeah. So there's another question. Will the platform find not at
I've
all
answered that
visited
question,
API?
Bharat. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And then how would you run security tests? We touched upon it. There's a I think Marcus had a question. Would you able to show examples? I think yeah. I think in this webinar we've covered API producer view, how the internal cleaning up internal discovery, internal API gateway, managing APIs from different gateways, different code repositories. So I think there was a question, would you be able to connect APIs, between on-prem and cloud? Absolutely, yes. So we do have different ways of connecting to API, connecting and getting APIs to our internal API hub or DAC service hub, we would like to call it. So I think gateway is one, connecting to gateway is one, connecting to your code repositories and is one, and then connecting to your Postman collections, or we've seen backstages connection, or connecting to your GitHub, and we've done connecting to CI/CD. And I think one of the placeholder. I think if you've seen in our product, in the API documentation, when somebody clicks on a tile, there's a metadata information, so you can even filter based on the metadata information. And I think we have quite a lot of AI capabilities here, which is kind of very unique, compared to other competitors. And then that's a main USP. And I think so. Today's, like I said, if you look at Infinity slide, the key marketplace elements, I think, putting together the multi-gateway connectivity, having a API producer view where you have a separate control plane, internal teams like architects, product owners, product managers, API analysts, who are responsible for maintaining a marketplace, but they need to have that producer view. I think that's what we've solved. And I think maybe in the next webinar, we can completely focus on the external API marketplaces. So How does what is it going to take for what are the features, elements that are needed to make that API marketplace a very successful one. So I think we can, that's again a very broader topic. What we've done today is the API producer view. I think from that perspective, having, like I said, API gateway was quite sufficient, until like 5 6 years ago, but no more now. You need to have a product approach, a gateway, API control plane, API management, and then and then you need to have a separate API marketplace as a product. I think that's how the APS the a successful APS ecosystem looks like. So I think we're on time. 45 minutes. Happy to take questions, offline. Yes. Anything else, Sean, on the closing remarks? Yeah.
No, Bharat. So I have it's a couple of more questions. I will answer those questions in the chat. Yeah, I would like to thank everyone, and I know it is a big turnout, right? I think everyone basically is registered. Have actually turned out, which is not a usual thing in a webinar. So I hope me and Bharat have actually given you something useful to take it back. And yeah, keep looking for more webinars from our side coming. And as Bharat said, we have the next one coming up in the first week of June. And we are also planning to do more of product demos going forward so that we will start putting on videos to understand what we do and how we evolve in our space, right? So I would like to thank everyone who joined and spent 45 minutes with us. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I think, and I hope it was worth a while of your time. And this was great fun doing it. And thanks for joining. And enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.